Hi, it's Dr. Parikh. This video is on what the heck is a literature review paper. And first I'm going to give you just a little bit of context of what APA style is. So APA, the American Psychological Association, runs a lot of journals, typically very well-respected journals. And so they came up with a standard style of how they wanted things to appear in their journals. And that style, because they are such a large organization, runs so many journals, and lots of other journals that they don't run said, that's a good style. I'm going to use that style. And so now it has become the dominant style for definitely psychology, but also a lot of other fields like nursing. A lot of business fields use APA style. Sometimes some fields are less rigid, and we'll say, as long as you're, either just conform to whatever that journal typically does, or as long as you're consistent, it's fine. But APA style is very structured. And it includes, when we think of a style, and there's lots of different styles for different types of writing. So, for example, journalists tend to use other style, different kinds of things. So APA style focuses on being clear and scientific, and also being accessible, and being inclusive. So it's not just how you cite your articles or how you format your paper. It's also about how do you write in a way that is respectful for other people, that recognizes other people's inherent dignity and worth. And APA is driven by stigmas that we know affect mental health. So there is a lot of advocacy in the way that they have people write. A literature review is a type of paper written in APA style that doesn't do original research. So you're not collecting data or analyzing data that somebody else has already collected. Your focus is on discussing the existing literature. It's really easy to just summarize. I mean, it's not easy, but it would be easy to fall into the trap of summarizing each article and stringing it together with an introduction and a conclusion, and kind of using each article's finding as your main points. And a big piece of a big motivation for how this class is organized is helping students break out of those ways of thinking. So let's look at what, so for this class, I use a very basic structure that is meant to be flexible, that you can fit lots of different topics in here. It's also not meant to stay exactly this structure for your entire college career. This is a training wheels paper, and so as you get more skilled, as you move into higher classes, especially getting into experimental psych and capstone, you'll need to become more flexible with this format. But this is a good starter. So title page, APA style, let's zoom in for a moment. We've got a running head, so just a shortened version of your title, a page number. Then we've got the title of your paper, bolded. I recommend just selecting everything. I just hit Command A or Control A, and you want everything to be double spaced with 0 before and 0 after. You've got your title bolded. And for this class, you start off with a title page pretty early. You're going to need to update that title later to make sure it fits what point you actually end up making in your paper. Then you'll have your name, however you prefer it to appear. APA style uses periods after initials, but most people also use their more formal names when they publish. So even if they go by a nickname, but it's your choice. If you would rather put your nickname on there, that's fine. If you have a preferred name, of course, that's totally fine. It is your choice how your name appears here. You have your affiliation, and then you have your university. So, they're both your affiliation. You have your department or school and your university. We go down to your abstract, and you can see here, this is a template that I've made that kind of discusses everything that's supposed to go into each section. In some ways, this replicates what you get from the outlines. As of this video, there are now outlines for every part of the paper. I used to not have outlines for the abstract and a few things, but I've added those in so you can find outlines for everything. I'm going to switch over to one of my sample papers, and I'll warn you, I have just updated quite a bit of the course. And all of those updates I think are really going to be helpful for students, but it means that when you look at your sample papers, I don't have any sample papers from my new way of doing things. So these three sample papers, Manatee, Cortez, and Bluebird, some people wanted to use their real names, some people wanted not to. When I ask for a sample paper, I always ask people what they want to do with their name. So these three, I have tried to update the sections that are updated. But one thing I haven't done is that now I'm asking you to use more articles, but to do less writing up of them. So you're getting fewer details from more sources, and I think that'll work out better. But these articles were expected to have 4 sources, and I think that's what they have. So you'll notice there's a lot more repetition of the same source and a lot fewer sources than you're going to be expected to have. If you look in the sample papers, so if we go here and look at the sample papers, you'll see there are 2019 samples. Those are very dated now. I wouldn't bother with those. I may even take them down. But there's 2021 samples, and those I have not done anything to. Whereas you can see I've been editing the others quite a bit. I don't know how much childcare I'm going to have in January, so I'm working while my kid is at his grandparents for New Year's. Life is fun. Happy New Year. So you start with an abstract. The abstract is a snapshot of your whole paper, and every article you read is going to have an abstract. Let me pull, so here's an article I use in some other videos, and you can see every article starts with an abstract. When you're doing your article search, the first thing you see is the title of the paper. The second thing you look at is the abstract, and then you decide whether you want to access the entire paper. So the abstract is probably going to be the very last thing that you write, because papers have a way of shifting and growing over time. And so you want to make sure that your paper, that your abstract reflects what you end up saying. But there's a few things that are really important to get in here. It's very important that you have a clear statement of purpose, or your thesis or hypothesis, depending on a hypothesis goes with the research proposal. So a statement of purpose or a clear thesis, something that's bigger than any one paragraph or section of your paper. You also want to include at least some limitations. The abstract is the only place where I'm really looking at specific word counts, and it needs to be 150 to 250 words. If you can't reach that, or if you're having trouble reaching that, I would just include more ideas from your discussion. So, add on future research, add on professional applications, or add more details up top. Let's see. I'm zoomed out a little bit because for me, this kind of overview video is really about the overall formatting, and I have trouble getting that if I'm too zoomed in. I think it's really important to see entire sections here. So keep in mind you can access these and look more closely at them. So you could even pull it up and just have it there. And as a reminder, things shift over time. If you're watching this, 2 years in the future, there might be plenty of sample papers at that point. And I may have even, retired these ones to their own folder. But I'll make sure that they still stay available because they're in this video. They might look slightly different. I might update more things about them. I will say all the updates I made to match the changes I made to the overall format, I think made the papers a lot better, so that's exciting. The abstract, so it starts on its own page. It has bolded heading there. It also has no indent. It's the only paragraph that has no indent. I hate the APA has special rules because I think it makes it harder for students to remember, but I think their goal, is to make it feel more distinct, because the thing about a style is when you're used to seeing it, it just makes sense. So when you're brand new to the style, it feels like a lot of arbitrary rules that don't do anything. But the more familiar you get with it, the more it feels like it just, it lets the details fall away and lets you focus on the paper in front of you because you just know, oh, that's an abstract. You don't have to say, I wonder what that is. Okay. Keywords are telling you, it's like tags, hashtags. I'm not fussy about what they are, but you need them because these are the words. In the olden days, I did this once in undergrad. They would print an index every so often, every year or every 10 years. And so you would look up words in the index and it would tell you which issues or which articles had, like where to go, I think it was volume, issue, page numbers, to find an article on that with that keyword listed. So keywords used to be incredibly important for finding articles. They still are important because many search functions are not as good as Google in the journal articles searching. Friendly reminder, if you're having trouble finding something you're looking for, talk to a librarian. They're ninjas. They'll even chat with you through the website. It's fabulous. But so keywords are the tags for your article. Title, one thing that's important, title appears up on the first page. It appears again at the top of the body of the paper, which is on page 3. Friendly thing that I want to show you. You'll notice I go down and then I hop right down because I'm using insert, break, page break. Don't hit enter, 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 enter. It makes formatting harder later, and you just don't need to use a page break for things that are supposed to start at the top of the next page. So things that start at the top of the next page, so title page starts at the top, abstract starts at the top, body of the paper, and then your references. We don't get into appendices in here, although it's more of the same. By the time part of this class is learning how to figure out APA style. So if you can figure out everything in this class, you can use online resources to figure out an appendix when the time comes. So you've got your title again at the top of this. This first paragraph, and this is one of the places where things look different. So if you look at older videos, older sample papers, I had 2 paragraphs here. It was very kind of repetitive and clunky. So I consulted with some other professors and came up with this on-ramp paragraph where you are getting attention, you are giving information, you're sharing specific ideas from your articles. This is a very unusual citation, but I've looked several times. This is how they cite it. Usually it's something more like this or this. So for the on-ramp paragraph, you are getting some attention, you're starting to cite some relevant literature, you're sharing your purpose or your thesis, and then you're giving some more basic information. You're kind of getting the reader up to speed, kind of like an on-ramp to a highway, because it's really tough to merge with traffic going 70 miles an hour if you're going 35 miles an hour. And so if I am brand new to your topic, I know nothing, I care nothing, it's really tough for me to just jump right in. So you're helping me care about the topic and see how it's important, and you're also giving me some basic background before you start jumping into details. So let's look a little more broadly at the sections here. So literature reviews start with what's called an introduction. So we've got everything at the beginning, and you don't need a heading. I used to do a heading just to kind of help structure students, but you're not supposed to have one. I decided to take it out and follow APA style a little more closely. I'm trying to stop teaching bad habits. So everything before the discussion in a literature review is considered the introduction. Research proposals have introductions as well that build up to your research question and hypothesis, and then you go into a few other sections describing the study. But they both end with a discussion. Discussion always start with some kind of summary of the information from the introduction. For a literature review, it's kind of showing how the main points addressed that purpose. Side note, I say it a lot, when you're reading an article, I always find the best place to start reading an article, I would read the abstract first, and then I would go to the discussion, because they always start with a quick, why did we do this? What did we do? And what did we find? And how do we make sense of that, given everything else we already know about the topic? So your discussion should be just the same. You have a very short literature review, so we just do a 1-paragraph summary. And then discussion should also critique. So you're going to talk about limitations and how future research can improve on what's already been done. And then you're also going to talk about professional applications. So how can people in the world doing their job do their job better based on ideas from, based on specific findings that you've discussed here. And then we end with a conclusion, which sort of wraps everything up and gives a final take-home message. I know that I breezed over the introduction. I will go back to it, I promise. References. This is where you list every article that you used. So everything you cite needs to be in your reference list, and everything in your reference list should be cited somewhere. Especially when you start doing larger papers, it's easy to get off kilter with that. So I always recommend having a specific step near the end where you check to make sure that everything ended up in both places. And then sometimes you can have tables, graphs, charts, other appendices. If you used a scale, you might include that scale. But you don't have, for this class, we're not going to deal with appendices. Appendices is the plural of appendix. Which is just something that you add on at the end of a paper. So thinking about the introduction of the literature review, and this introduction kind of carries the same with a research proposal. You are discussing ideas from the literature, and it's really easy, as I've said, to just summarize each article. But what an integrative literature review does differently is it takes specific ideas and groups them together in a new way. And I like that because you're not just doing a book report. You are actually creating something new. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle that nobody has ever seen before. But that's difficult because nobody designed the puzzle for you. It's much more like going out and making a patchwork quilt than putting together a standardized puzzle. So you are taking, you have all these materials in front of you, and you are trying to figure out how to make things fit in a way that makes sense and makes a pattern. And this class is all about how to do that. And there's a lot of structure for that, starting with how do you read a journal article, all the way up to how do you edit, how do you put things together, how do you use feedback to improve. So within the introduction, you'll notice there are different themes. So you want to help, if we just had a whole bunch of paragraphs, so the first easy thing to do is to do a book report. The second easy thing to do is to do bullet points, where you've just kind of taken all your notes and presented them, but you have not yet created something new. You're still just presenting notes. So what you do with your notes is what makes the literature review. You are finding common themes, you're finding ways that things can be grouped together, and this is where you'll also notice there's a lot of repetition of the same sources in these sample papers. One thing I'm moving toward, I'm hoping that it gets easier to do that kind of integration when you have more sources to work with. So here's hoping. Each paragraph here in the main part of the literature review should have at least 2 sources. And actually, as I'm looking, this doesn't need to be cited again. When you're citing, you don't need to cite again unless you use something else in between. You'll notice with the citations, let me zoom in just a little bit. Here, again, this one's kind of weird. This is considered one author. It was a paper done with a whole body. There's 2 authors here, so there's an ampersand joining them. All of these things that are et al. Means that there's 3 or more authors. You'll notice we never use initials when we are doing our references or our in-text citations, but we do have initials in the references. I do a different video on the reference list where I go through how to go from an article to a reference. So you'll have at least 2 different sources. Oh goodness. In each paragraph. So the first thing you're going to focus on as you're developing your literature review is how do you group the ideas into different major themes? And those are going to become your headings. You want, the goal for this paper is an on-ramp paragraph, and then 2 themes with at least 2 paragraphs each. Each paragraph should have at least 2 sources, and each theme should have at least 3 sources. So I have some very specific amounts of integration I'm looking for. More is better. I just realized there's Jewett et al. And Jowett et al., and they're slightly different years. I wonder if that's a mistake. I think it probably is, both Jowett et al. 2013. Huh. This is a great time to mention that my sample papers, none of them are perfect. They are papers that did well in class. Sometimes it's because I didn't, sometimes I didn't notice mistakes like that. But when you cite every time you start a new paragraph or every time you change topics or sources. So we cite it up here, cite a different article here. Originally, this author had cited the next sentence, but with APA style, we just assume that as long as you're continuing the same thing, we assume it's the same citation until you give us a new one. Here, even though we just cited it up earlier in the paragraph, we need to cite it again because otherwise the logic is that it would still be Appleton. Each paragraph, so first you're kind of grouping things into major headings, then you're grouping them into paragraphs. You figure out what order makes sense within the paragraph, you edit things to make things flow, and then you think of what is one sentence that ties everything together. Every paragraph needs a topic sentence that explains the main purpose of the paragraph. You're not, and it's important to notice the way that other academic authors write in journal articles. You're writing as if you're going to be published in a journal article. And that's important because blogs, magazines, news, websites, they all write in different tones. Many of them are looking to keep your interest. They're much more conversational, and they may start a paragraph with a question and then answer that question throughout the paragraph. Academic writing is much more straightforward and direct. Our stuff is complicated enough without adding any mysteries or questions to it. So we try, if you look at the article, pay attention as you're reading your articles and notice how they use topic sentences to direct your attention. You are going to offer me some evidence, and before you do that, you tell me what the evidence is supposed to show. We don't use the word prove. That's really important. Because things change in science. Things that we knew for sure before do change over time. But you are demonstrating evidence for something. So you have so your literature review, I'm going to just kind of go briefly over the headings. And I also have a video to help you review at the end to make sure you got everything in. But you can also rewatch this anytime. This is bugging me now because there's different years in different places. So we start with an on-ramp paragraph. And then we have our first heading, 2 paragraphs under that with lots of citations. Another heading, 2 more paragraphs. And that is our introduction. Discussion heading with a summary, and it's going to feel kind of silly. This is driving me nuts now. It's going to feel a little silly to be summarizing things because it was so short, but the goal here is to help the reader see what was the main themes. So focus on, go back and look at your topic sentences. Think about what you really want the reader to remember from all of these details, because there's no way I'm going to remember all the details in a paper, even one this short. And so instead, the details help just get buy-in so that I can remember the main point as being trustworthy. Then you go through your limitations and what future research can do to improve on that. And again, there's outlines for all of these steps. Professional applications, how people can use the information you've just given them. And then a final conclusion, which is going to sound, so there's 3 big overview paragraphs. There's your abstract, your discussion summary, and your conclusion. They're going to sound similar, but there are outlines to help you see how each one functions just a little differently. And then you have your references, and that is a literature review. Again, your purpose is to say something new using, by putting together information from existing articles in a way nobody has quite looked at it yet. For this paper, we're not, it's really open to you what your topic is. As you get more advanced and especially get into experimental psych and capstone, there will be more of a push to ask a question that doesn't have an obvious answer yet, where you actually are evaluating research and trying to kind of create a novel perspective. For this class, we are just it's a training wheels paper, and so it's a smaller version of the kinds of papers you're going to write. And so I'm not as finicky about you taking a new perspective on things, but I am going to want you to think a lot about what the data means taken together and where the limitations are. So as a reminder, there are several sample papers to look at. Some of them are going to be a better fit than others for the current framework, but it helps. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you look here, some of them say LR and some of them say RP. It's because I try pretty hard to match a literature review and a research proposal so you can actually compare them side by side. And in fact, when I do the research proposal video, I will likely do that. Depending on when you watch this, there's a small chance that it will still be the old version of the research proposal. I will make sure that the new one is up before you actually have to write your research proposal. But for anyone past spring 2022, that will not be a problem. I think that is it. So again, each one is a little different. I think I try to fix all the API errors, but you can see I was finding new mistakes as I was looking on camera. But I believe I have updated these. Thanks. Bye-bye.